We are live on the Chemistry Nobel Google Hangout. This is the first Google Hangout for chemical and engineering news, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. My name's Carmen Drahl, and I'm a senior editor with the magazine, and I'm joined by three very special guests, plus my colleague Lauren Wolf. We're joined by Neil Withers of Chemistry World, Paul Bracker of ChemBark and St. Louis University, and Simon France, formerly of NobelPrize.org and currently at BBC Future.
Hello.
Hello.
Glad to have you all here. So I think we should probably start with the big question. We're days away from the announcement of the Chemistry Nobel Prize. Who do you like to take home the prize?
I think Paul should go first because he's the master at this. He's got the odds. He does it every year.
Okay, well, I'll weigh in with, I'll give you my top three who are rotating, who will keep on probably being in my top three until they finally get picked. But of those are the nuclear hormone signaling guys like Pierre Chambon and his group, the single molecule spectroscopy / laser guys like W.E. Morner up there first, and then the bioinorganic crew, who I think Harry Gray is always brought up there first. My thought this year is, of those three, that the group with perhaps the best chance of those with short odds is probably the single molecule spectroscopy guys, the laser guys, just because of last year was a biological year, and you know, people are already get upset that biologists steal the chemistry prizes. At least that's how some people view it. That I don't. My thought would be that the Nobel Committee might want to mix it up a bit. So in terms of mixing it up, perhaps those P chemists can get in there and get what's due to them.
It seems like there's a lot of other people are predicting those physical chemists and the spectroscopists this year, but you know, predictions only go so far, don't they? That's the thing. We like to think that the Nobel Committee kind of have a informal rota, so it goes around the different parts of the science, and it does seem to work like that, but we'll never know.
Well, we know to a certain extent how it works because the statutes of the as stipulated by Nobel's will say it's for the work that's the best discovery within the preceding year. So that it's not necessarily that it goes round the different departments. There's some sort of timely hook as to why people think that a discovery merits the prize over any other. So it's not necessarily a question of it was a biology prize this year, so it'll be an organic chemistry prize next year, etc., etc. But in terms of who I want to get it, I don't really have any sort of specific prizes, but where I think the Nobel Prize sort of is at its strongest is when it rewards really basic research that had unintended applications, or for research that reversed dogma, because I think those are two very strong messages to put out to the scientific community on such a sort of public scale, that basic research does mean something. So in this world of metric-based grant applications and all that kind of stuff, I think it's a valuable message to put out there at the very highest level. And also that, you know, it's not always about following scientific thought, but it's challenging it too. So I hope that whatever is awarded and whoever's awarded the prize, it sort of ticks those boxes.
I have to say that of the odds that I list on the website every year, that those odds are based on whom I think will win, not necessarily whom I think should win.
Right.
And one thing that comes to mind if we're going to talk about whom we think should win it or we'd like to see win it is that I think that it's an absolute travesty that Carl Djerassi and those who worked with him haven't been recognized for the really great chemistry that they did towards developing the birth control pill. I mean, it was fantastic chemistry. It had consequences for the medical field, and also it just had huge consequences for society as well. And I think that it just falls into one of those examples of a major discovery that perhaps should have been recognized by a prize and never was. I mean, there are a bunch of people over time that pop up to mind, like Dmitry Mendeleev was kind of given the business around the turn of the century, around the turn of the last century, Gilbert Lewis was completely screwed out of the prize for deuterium in 1934. I think Gerasi, you know, and I'm not sure how old Gerasi is, and I think a lot of people think that
He's
and he's
90.
down.
He
He's
just turned 90.
Just turned
Yeah.
90.
Yeah, and speaking for my gender, I will say, heck yes, birth control pill.
Yeah, so you start to wonder. I mean, I know Pierre Chambon is up there in age as well, and I don't know whether that goes into what the committee thinks about when they think about what prize should we recognize, whom should we recognize, whether someone's running out of time since you can't have a posthumous prize. But
I would have
really
been curious about that with the Heck, Negishi, etc. cross-coupling prize.
I'm in. You know if that goes into.
Sorry?
Do you know if the age is ever considered?
I don't know if it's ever I don't know if it's ever a deciding factor, but certainly there is what can be considered is how long ago a groundbreaking discovery was made and whether it's led to other groundbreaking discoveries. And so there's definitely been sort of prizes which you could argue were awarded on the basis that in order to recognise other prizes down the line, it could never possibly happen without this discovery which we haven't rewarded yet. So that's certainly a factor, and sort of age creeps into that sort of discussion. But I don't think there's ever sort of they're getting on a bit, so we should give them a prize. I don't think it's in discussion.
John Gurdon, was that last year that he won for the Medicine Prize, and that was for work done? Was that 50 years ago?
Yep. Yeah, it was a long time ago. And
so I guess we can hope that Gerasi's time hasn't completely gone, and that he's still got a chance. But you do have to wonder, if they haven't given it him yet, then what are they waiting for?
Well, there is that discussion, and also it's how does that relate to other sort of nominations for the prize that are being argued at the same time.
Let me interject here for folks that are watching. If you would like to ask a question, we're going to be monitoring Twitter, and you can use the hashtag ChemNobel to ask a question, and we'll try to get to you as possible as we can. So we talked a little bit about the picks. Would you folks like to move on to sort of odds making in general? I mean, this is sort of I wouldn't call it a cottage industry, but it does seem like everybody likes to put out some kind of predictions, whether they're more formalized, a la Thomson Reuters, or even yourself, Paul. I mean, is there any sort of secret sauce? I mean, is there anything that makes one bit of predictions better than others?
I have to say that I think it falls into a personal decision. Like the people in Vegas, when they make odds, they have an odds maker who has experience, and then they start taking bets. And if the bets go too far to one side, then they readjust the odds accordingly so that they could get so that they could be sure that they're going to make money. Here, I'm not. I put out those odds for fun, where I'm not, taking bets. I'm not a bookmaker, but so I think it's more of a personal. I hesitate to call it expertise, but just like kind of a gut feeling. Just basically also just listening to people in terms of making cases. Like I made an initial list once, and I omitted a ton of things that I really hadn't thought about. And I think that one of those things might have been, like in the original list, I forget whether I put GFP and the green fluorescent protein up there that early, but maybe it was someone in my lab came up to me and said, you know what, that's a super important discovery that we use all the time. We don't really think of it, and that probably is going to fall into a chemistry prize. And sure enough, it did pretty soon after. So it's really more putting out the call, listening to people, taking arguments, and then also doing things like looking to see what kind of rotation there is, also looking at pre-Nobel, what people call pre-Nobel prizes, so things like the Wolf Prize in chemistry, things like the Lasker Award in basic research, in basic medical research. Those are usually predictors, or at least a high percentage of those who win those prizes go on to win a Nobel Prize in some field, whether it be chemistry, physiology, and medicine, or whatever. So you kind of take a look at those. Schechtman won a Wolf Prize in physics, which is why I think he fell off a lot of chemists' radars, and that was a surprise 2 years ago. But looking at the pre-Nobels, listening to chatter in the hallways, and what other people think, and then kind of making some educated guesses.
I think with the ISI's prediction, predictions, because they do make 3 or 4 every year and add to them, is that the way they look at it I don't think is necessarily quite right, because they're always looking through the prism of citations. And so as the number of papers published has gone up exponentially, that means that it's always going to be weighted to much more recent things. So they're always thinking of things that have only happened in the past 5 or 10 years, whereas very often it looks like the Nobel Committee are looking back 20 or 30 years to things that are now in the textbooks, that you kind of forget that somebody had to do the research originally. It's so well, it's taught to everyone knows it. That's the stuff that does win Nobels, and probably is the stuff that should win. So that's why I always take the Thomson and Reuters with a large pinch of salt, because they just don't look far enough back.
Well, I think all attempts to create odds or predictions around prize are as good as each other, and the real answer is that they're not that predictive at all. But it seems to be the best way to look at them is if you pick a handful of names, and soon enough at least a small proportion of them will be given the prize. And I think it points to two things. I think it points to the fact that there is a sort of a fixed number of discoveries that sort of fall into the remit of possibles, and this is a nomination-based process, and so you can bet your life that a pretty similar amount of the names are bandied around every year, and the question is how do you debate which one is more worthy than the other in this particular year to get the prize. And so it's not just about citations and not just about what's come before, but it's how do you get it? How do you sort of apply that to the rule of it's the discovery which meant the most within the preceding year? And sometimes that's about another body of research which has promoted the original discovery to light, or allowed that to be applied in a different way, or whatever. Or it's that it's a discovery that's the basic discovery has allowed a totally applied field to begin to happen, and so you reward the basic discovery at that time. So there's lots of different factors, and no one, apart from the Nobel Committee, really know what they debate and discuss and argue about in terms of one over the other. So it's you certainly can't predict that through odds.
I'm seeing a question that has come in on the ChemNobel hashtag. Someone's asking if this year's Nobel were to be awarded to a theoretical or computational chemist, who would take that one?
Something I think you said, is the Nobel going to be awarded to a theoretical or computational chemist? Is that correct?
They're saying who would it be if it was?
Who would it be if it was?
I'll leave that to the experts.
I think a lot of people that a lot of people raise Martin Karplus's name up there. Ash at Curious Wave Function would be a great person to ask, because he works in the field. But if I had to guess, Martin Karplus. But I really don't think that you're going to see it awarded for computational chemistry. I think we saw it in 1998 with John Popel. I think that was the year, and I really don't see computational coming in there again anytime soon, unless something big happens. I just don't see it. I think I have him on my list at 99-1. So cross those fingers.
The dark horse candidates. I'll just interject and say that we're live talking about speculation in the run-up to the Chemistry Nobel Prize. We have 5 of us here, and you can weigh in by using the Twitter hashtag ChemNobel.
Yeah. One thing that I want to bring up, if we have a lull in the conversation, is the fact that I think that the Chemistry Nobel Prize is taken too seriously by chemists, or perhaps, maybe people at my level, grad student, postdoc, or whatever. There tends to be some hero worship, which is great. But I look at the Nobel, the importance of the Nobel being more so with the interaction with the public. It's maybe the one day of the year where chemistry is guaranteed to get in the evening news, and there really is no other day of the year where that happens. And it's great that we recognize a chemist for an achievement. And I really don't think you could point to anything recent where it was a mistake prize, where the committee really didn't do a good job recognizing a good discovery. But the problem is on the flip side, where if you treat it as the Nobel being the end goal of something, that you have a problem, because of the committee. There have been just some absolute howlers in terms of things that they've missed, things like Mendeleev, things like Gilbert Lewis. the one, and even recently, it's not just the old people. I thought that when Gabor Szomorjai was excluded from the 2007 prize for the heterogeneous catalysis, that was an absolute disgrace, and just recognized Ertl by himself. Ertl, fantastically deserving, but they had been linked together for so long, they had shared a Wolf Prize together for the same field, that was a real eyebrow raiser, and I thought that was just an absolute travesty. So I hope that chemists especially, and the people who are probably watching this webcast, would realize that, the Nobel Prize it's basically, why should we allow a small group of people in Sweden to decide what's important in our field? And we shouldn't. We should keep our eyes open, be scientists, and make people prove why their discovery is important, talk to other people. And there are plenty of things that don't get recognized, and people, just because they haven't won a Nobel Prize, shouldn't feel that they're going to be tossed on the dustbin of chemical history, because that certainly isn't the case. And there are plenty of Nobel Prize winners that history kind of has forgotten. Or I could open this door and yell out of it, "Who's Theodore Richards?" and no one would have any idea.
But do you think that's unique to chemists? I mean, I see that as a widespread thing about the deification of Nobel Prize winners.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think that for any field that's the case too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can really blame the wider media for it, because the fact they do fixate on the Nobel Prize, and they, not just that they have this barrage of news when it happens and then nothing for the rest of the year, but the fact that they ignore plenty of other prizes as well. And so there are many other prizes and many other great scientists who just don't get the coverage that the Nobel gets.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to get at that a little bit, because the MacArthur Genius Grants just got awarded, including to Phil Barron, an card-carrying organic chemist, and we have the Nobel Prizes. I feel like of the prizes that are out there, those are the two that really get out in the public eye. I mean, what do people think? What do people have a feel for why that is?
Well, I think from when I was there, I think the massive appeal for the Nobels was that they're one of the oldest prizes. They're not the oldest, but they're one of the oldest, and they were certainly the first to be totally global in remit. And there's a massive secrecy behind it, which is immensely appealing. And I think and so that's not just the secrecy, but that there's points to argue over and points to celebrate and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's just carried that momentum across the time. Whether you agree or not with the secrecy, I think that's a massive part of its appeal.
I think that's definitely part of it too. That you have the prestige, it has this gravity because of it's been around for so long, and you have it's big prize money, and so many famous names across all fields. Like, even if you don't know, you can't name a Nobel Prize winning chemist, Nobel Prize winners who won in peace or won in literature or whatever, that you get associated with that, so you kind of get drawn into this prestigious system. And
perhaps that's another reason why they're so widely known, is because they do have the Peace Prize and the literature, and there's physics, and so it's a really broad spread. So people who don't necessarily know about chemistry know, well, I know what it means to win a Nobel Peace Prize or the Nobel Literature or economics. So they see that as it's a big prize, it's a big stamp, and so they're then able to put them on a level that they, not necessarily perhaps they don't understand, but they recognise.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, most of the general public know about the Peace Prize over any of the science prizes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing some more questions from. About that. I'm seeing some more questions. So here's one from CRO. What's the chance for a too early prize this year, like organocatalysis or gold?
I don't see it happening. I think that the last too early TOO early prize that I think was awarded was people talk about, I forget whether Fullering's was in 94, 95, or 96, somewhere around there. But 96. I think that 96. Yeah, people kind of looked at that at the time, and they were curious new molecules. They had only been discovered in 85 or 86, by Smalley and Curl and Croto. That people thought that these things held immense possibilities for like solving all sorts of problems. And it was only in like 1991 where they were made, where I think Kretschmer was his name, was the person who made, was able
Kretschmer
to,
and Hummel, was it? Something like
yeah,
that?
they actually were able to make them in high yield by arcing a current across, graphite rods, and it would just rain down fullerenes that could be purified. So they were discovered in '85. They weren't made widely available until '91, and they were still kind of expensive at that point. But then to award the prize then, I think that a lot of people thought that that was a little bit too early. I think that the prizes that people are talking about now that I think are a little bit too early, or a lot of it too early, would be nanotechnology. They're really, aside from stuff like integrated circuits, which I believe have already been recognized in physics, that there's really nothing there that's really panned out and stood the test of time. But a lot of people are saying they'd like to see Charlie Lieber or Paul Alivisatos recognized, or George Whitesides in that area. Another one is, what else is out there? Solar energy. I think solar energy is a hot field, and a lot of people would like to see people like Gretzel recognized for the dye-sensitized solar cells. But the problem that I see with that is that if you recognize dye-sensitized solar cells, then is that going to scoop kind of a later prize where if someone actually, dye-sensitized solar cells kind of aren't the answer to consumable energy. And if someone actually does discover the answer to to meeting our growing demand for consumable energy, that is something that you would definitely recognize with the Nobel Prize. And I think that you kind of have to wait for that before you award a prize in solar energy. So I think energy's out, except for perhaps lithium-ion batteries. A lot of people are thinking are definitely. I know Neil brought that to my attention a while ago with Goodenough, right?
That's it, yeah. John B. Goodenough.
Yeah, good enough. Okay.
So good enough.
Yeah, right.
Bad joke. Sorry. I wanted to cut in and ask Lauren, because she's one of our go-to nano people. I mean, do you agree with what Paul's saying? I mean, do you feel like nano? Yes, no.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm an expert. I write about it a lot, but actually one of my, story ideas was sort of looking at the carbon nanotube. Wherefore art thou? People have been sticking them in all kinds of stuff in the lab, but where is it in terms of, actual uses? The same thing with nanomedicine. I mean, they've been working on this for a long time, and for various reasons, funding and other stuff, getting these into clinical trials. So I don't think it's there yet. Someday.
I think for me, a lot of these things fall into the same category that the Thomson Reuters things do. That they're highly cited. They're all very, very, it's very good work, but it's all 5, 10, 15 years old, and it hasn't been proven yet. So I think that it's perhaps their day will come. Perhaps MOFs and organic catalysis and everything. Perhaps those will get prizes, but I think for the next few years, I think they're just too recent.
Is it okay for me to say that I didn't know what a MOF was until I joined the staff at C&EN News?
Well, you just said it, so.
All right, it's true. I wanted to move into sort of that small committee in Scandinavia there that I think Paul alluded to. Maybe Simon, you've been inside. Can you give us a little insight into the nomination process and what insights one might be able to glean in terms of predictions?
Well, the process is sort of highly secretive. It's like it's a small committee that's part of a bigger operation, and the way it works is it's a nomination-based process. So in the September of the year before, they send out nominations to a select group of people, which include previous living laureates, professors in Scandinavia, certain scientists around the world, and they're supposed to. Everybody delivers their nominations by, I think, the beginning of February. I think it's beginning of February or end of February. I can't remember which one it is. And then once all the nominations come in, they sift through them and they throw out all the ones that are obviously not in the reckoning for it. But they build up a sort of a long list of names, and then they go through a process of a few months where they sort of talk to outside experts and find out either whether what these people have done, because they're trying to find two things. They're trying to find the discovery that is deserving of this year's prize, but also the people who are deserving of a prize for that discovery. So the conversation is twofold, and they talk to a lot of people from outside to either get a sense of newcomers on the list of what's happened, or if it's names they've seen before and discussed before, what's new to add to that to their case for the prize. That tends to go to about sort of just the beginning of summer, and then they create a sort of list of between, I'd say, 4 and 7 possibilities. They narrow it down to that, and then the summer is spent by the committee compiling reports on the candidates. And it used to be the case where, in the olden days, where they'd go off to the summer house in Stockholm, you'd see all these crates of papers being delivered to their house and being brought on board, and they'd be able to do that. Nowadays they use PDFs, which is a lot easier to do. But by the end of the summer, each member of the committee has created a report based on a discovery and the people who they think should be in the running for that sort of thing, and then they argue the case for each prize in front of the committee, and the committee debates the merits, the pros and cons of each one, and the pros and cons of each one over each other. And then they sort of reach a decision by around September, where they subject their final recommendations, and they sort of go through an unofficial decision process. So they decide who they think is going to be to get that prize that year, but they don't actually make the official decision until the morning of the announcement. So you'll go to the Royal Academy of Sciences, and I think that the announcement's around 11:45 Stockholm time, and you'll see they'll have this formal meeting where they'll say, does everybody agree with our final decision? And they'll raise their hands, and they're not allowed to conclude anything for that year until they see a majority decision of hands raised. So even though the decision may be a formality, they still go through an official process on the morning of the decision. And then there's an hour between that and the public announcement. So in terms of what goes on within those discussions, well, it depends on who's on the committee, because the committee is a smaller subsection of the entire Academy of Sciences, and they go on. I can't remember if it's a group of 6 or 8 people, but they go on a rotation every 3 or 4 years. And so there's always a different mix of expertise.
Oh, the Nobel Committee members, I brought that up in a tab. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. I see 6 people on the Nobel Committee for 2013.
Yeah, so you might want to go through their sub-disciplines, because that might be quite revealing as to what sort of areas they may be discussing.
For the record, it's inorganic, molecular biology, organic, theoretical, physical, biophysics.
Okay. No inorganic?
Just one inorganic, the first one. Yeah.
So curious as to what the chemists think of that.
Well, they pretty much spans everything, but you said physical a couple times, and also the single molecule spectroscopy definitely does touch on the biological side where the applications are, but I don't know, you look at that list every year and you think, I thought last year that it was kind of tilted towards the inorganic side, and so what do I know? But I'm getting out. Yeah, I'm getting out of that game in terms of guessing it. But what I will say is that I thought that when they choose one person out of the committee to announce the prize and to explain it to the public. So my thought was, if you could recognize their faces and see who's up there at the podium to present the prize, that maybe that gives you an idea. Like if it's the organic guy, then it's something organic. It could be total synthesis. Or if it's the inorganic guy, then it's the bioinorganic people. Or
they have video from the last couple years. I mean, if you have 10 minutes, you could look it up and see if that holds true.
Add it to your spreadsheet, Paul.
Admittedly, that gives you very little time to make your bet.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. By the time they file through that door, this is more of the live blogging when I stay up late to watch it. The minute you see someone walk through the door, you think, oh, this has to be the organic guys or the inorganic guys or the PChem guys.
It's true. You'll have the committee members who sit down there, and you'll have the person who gives the actual lecture during the announcement. and they're brought in. It's their specific area of expertise. So if you're good with names and faces and subjects, there you go.
I've got a question for Simon from the internet. This is from ChemJobber. He says, there are rumors in the U.S. that U.S. chemists tour European universities to up their chances. Would this be effective?
To improve the chances of being nominated?
Or, well, I guess so, yeah.
Maybe. I don't know if that's the case, but I think there's certainly a lot of discussion that goes on beforehand. So it's not the nomination process is not just restricted to people submitting names in that being discussed. There's a whole the committee are devoted towards investigating fields well before then, seeing what's on the rise and what's not on the rise. And you have Nobel Symposia in Stockholm every summer, which is around certain subjects, and that gets groups of people in talking about how advanced fields are. And Nobel Symposia are well known for being the only conference that no one says no to because they want to be in Stockholm talking about stuff under a Nobel moniker. And that sort of conversation goes on all the time because I think that it's only natural for scientists to discuss that. As to whether people do that more actively and lobby in a more sort of strategic way, I don't know the truth, but it wouldn't surprise me if that happened.
I mean, none of us, eminent enough chemists, perhaps Paul later to be considered for it. But have you heard any rumours of things that eminent chemists who wanted to win the prize might be doing apart from lecture tours or, trying to raise their profile? Do you hear any noises like that?
No, I don't. But what I do hear is that because people nominate and because people are asked for their expert opinion, you often hear about certain candidates being given the unofficial nod, as in I got that call from Stockholm, and so there is that kind of nod and wink thing that goes on, but I don't know specifically of any sort of strategic or lobbying tactics that people employ.
I'll jump in here and say that I definitely heard rumors. One of the things that was discussed in 2007 when Sommerjai was left out of that award, there were rumors in the hallway that he had always said that this was something that was important to him, and that he thought, from what I've heard, I've never met him, spoke with him, but I've heard that he made no secret that he thought that he might get it, and that might have been one of the things that worked against him. Now, in terms of what he did to pursue that, I don't know, but I do know those Nobel Symposia that's kind of, I think, what starts the rumors, because if you start hearing, your boss is absent, and then you talk to the secretaries, and you're like, where is this guy? It's like, oh, he's at the Nobel Symposium in Sweden. It's like, whoa, what is this? And then that starts going down the hallway. It's like, yeah, the guy's he's at the Nobel Symposium. I don't know what it's about. I don't know what he's talking about.
Do you speak from personal experience, Paul?
I certainly do. And I've been in group meetings where a Swedish guy from the Nobel Foundation happened to sit in the group meeting, and kind of awkwardly, because we're talking about the stuff that we're doing in the lab now, and there's this guy just sitting there, who was introduced as, Sven from Sweden or whatever his name was, and of course then we all start like jabbing people. It's like, what is that guy here for? Is he being vetted for? Is the boss being vetted for the prize? Whatever. We'll protect the names of the people to protect the innocent, but I mean, it's not too hard to kind of try to figure it out, but still. I think there's all grad students and postdocs who start these rumors, and who knows what really is important, but when we see Swedish people, we get very excited.
That'll be the same graduate students and postdocs that make hoax calls to their supervisors around.
Oh, who would do that? Yeah, that we've always joked about. That as far as I know, I've never been in a lab where anyone admitted to doing this, but we would always joke that calling up the boss early in the morning on that day could lead to some hilarious consequences and perhaps lethal consequences for us. So I think that no one had the courage to do that.
So I want to jump in and talk about maybe going outside our disciplinary boundaries a little bit, because there's a question from Twitter. coming in from Kevin Davis, and he wants us to jump over to physics for a minute and say, do you think that the Nobel Committee might break the traditional rule of three if, as a lot of people suspect, the Higgs boson could win?
Oh, I guess I should answer that, really. I don't think they will, because in order to do that, they're going to have to change the statute. And so that would have to happen on an official level. And it would have to be agreed on by all the prize disciplines for that to happen, because that's a fundamental rule change.
But but you could argue that they broke it with the guy. The guy unfortunately had passed away just a few days before. And
well, you could
and
argue.
then also, there's. I mean, I know you've mentioned it a couple of times that they give it for the most important discovery of the past year, which, if you read that straight up, you'd assume it was the discovery was made the last year. So you could argue that they're by giving things older things. So that's kind of two of the original things that they kind of either have ignored a lot or just the once.
Well, no, I think you can argue what they've done is they've interpreted the actual rule. So in the case of Ralph Steinman, who sadly passed away before he was awarded the medicine prize, you could argue that no one knew that he had died, and therefore that was certainly the argument the committee gave. And it was, if he'd have passed away before the nomination process, then he wouldn't have got, or during the nomination process, technically he can't be awarded the prize. But because to the best of their knowledge, he had passed away at the time of he hadn't passed away to their knowledge, I mean to say, at the time of the announcement, then technically it was something they couldn't really turn back on. I mean, what would you do in that situation? The other example you gave was, what was that, Neil?
I was just saying that in the original statutes it says that it should be for a discovery made in the past year. So I think they haven't stopped that forever.
And I think that there was a decision to interpret that liberally fairly early on, because it was just so difficult to be able to enforce that in practice. The rule of three is something you can't really interpret in any other way than outside of number. What you can do is that there's a possibility within that. I think that could happen over and above changing the rule of 3 to 4 without telling anyone. But I think, but fundamentally, if they want to change that rule, they wouldn't announce that as a change by naming 4 people. They would have to go through the official statute process to be able to change that and then be able to do that.
Do you think there's any chance that they would think about doing that? Because that is probably the single most controversial part of the whole thing. People get missed out. God forbid they ever delay it until somebody dies. But that's the kind of thing that people suggest might happen.
So I think it's talked about all the time, and it's certainly something they hear all the time. I think the sort of broader question on that is where I think then there could be a possibility, and there's nothing within the rules that doesn't suggest it can't be awarded to an institution, because that's what the Peace Prize does. So the question is, for example, could you split the Higgs Prize in half, give one half to Higgs and Engler, and give the other half to CERN? And that's not outside of the rules at the moment. So that is a possibility. The issue there is there's never been a science prize given to an institution. It's only been the Peace Prize that's ever been awarded to institutions. So that comes down to, I think this is my personal opinion, but I think it comes down to the sort of the committee's interpretation of who makes discoveries, and is it people or institutions? And I think that there's still the feeling that it's down to individuals. And so whether that will change and whether the Higgs will be the one that changes that, we're going to find out very soon.
I would be remiss if I didn't get in the question from, Kem Jobber asked this question on Twitter, and he jokingly marked it as being a troll, but I thought it was worthwhile. Who are the biologists that are favored to win the chemistry prize? And I kind of want to take that more broadly in terms of, it seems to me anyway that a lot of chemists will grumble about this, biologists winning the prize. Are we beating a dead horse here? Should we just let it go? Is there something to it?
Yeah, I'd say let it go, because again, don't look for validation from this small group of Swedes for what's important in chemistry. The people who deserve the Nobel Prize are whoever these guys say deserve the Nobel Prize. If they want to give it to a bunch of people who aren't members of a chemical society and they're doctors or biologists, it's their money to dispense as they want to. I don't think that the Nobel Prizes are like this institution that that's looking out for the greater good of chemistry. I really just see them as something that, it's a one-off thing. It's a day of fun, and that's it. But I don't trust these guys to determine what's important in chemistry, and I don't think anyone else should. And then correspondingly, whomever they decide to give it to, that's who deserves it. No one, I don't care after that. It's for the public. It's for fun, and there's really nothing more to it in my mind.
I think exactly what you said there is for the public, and I think that's the reason why I do care. I think that's why I spent a while a few years ago thinking about why should we care? There are so many other prizes. It's just another award. It's like the Oscars. Who cares? But because it is for the public, and it is the one time the public sees some chemistry, that I think it is important, and I think they should feel some sort of responsibility to chemistry. I'm sure they must feel a very heavy responsibility to the history of the prize, but to chemistry and the public, this is the only time they interact pretty much. So, but I guess you can just think that if biologists are getting it, that just means that chemistry is invading other places rather than biology invading us.
Well, so that's my attitude to it. I'm a molecular biologist by trade, and I actually welcome the idea that aspects of what was called molecular biology before the Human Genome Project is defined through chemistry, because I certainly sort of did my research career when there was this whole arrogance about the potential of ACs, Gs, and Ts, and actually to understand life you have to understand it at the level of chemistry. And so when I see prizes going that are biologically related, I think it's great to tell biologists that it's not about the code and it's not about biology. It's about chemistry. It's about understanding the alignment of atoms. It's about understanding chemical molecules, whether they're vitamins or proteins, and that. So I think it's great that there's a recognition that chemistry filters into all forms of this kind of research, and it's important in that way. Now, I'm sure chemists don't agree with that, but from my point of view, I think it's great to see that a science like chemistry means so much.
I think I can agree with that on one level, but then I think there's another level where it's you have a favorite. It's like a football team who you want to win, and then because I don't know so many of the people on that side, on the biological side, when they win again, it's like Man United winning again or something. It's like I want my team to win. So I guess I think there are two sides, and I don't always see it on the day in perhaps the right way.
But it seems to be something that's unique to chemistry. I mean, I don't ever see arguments in the other prizes quite like that. Why is that?
You had something, Lauren, didn't I?
I was just going to say, well, I might answer that. People call chemistry the central science, and so we touch on so many different things. And that was going to be my question: is it possible that research is just becoming more multidisciplinary, and because we're in the center of it all, that maybe that's what happens?
Or is it that disciplines, university institution disciplines, get renamed and rebranded, and they are, structural biology? What is structural biology? Is it chemistry? Is it biology? What is it?
We know the Nobel Committee likes it.
Yeah, historically so, but it's the molecular understanding of a large molecule. So is that biology? I don't think it is.
Well. Any parting thoughts, folks?
I was going to ask for us to part to each person, kind of like summarize. You pick your one person that you think is going to win it, or one subject, I guess.
I'll go single molecule spectroscopy and lasers with Morner or at Zaire, and keep my fingers crossed. We'll see how it goes.
I'll go for good enough and lithium-ion batteries. Well, that's who I want to win, not who I think we will win, and because it's always different.
So I've never ever predicted anything that even got close to it. So just for Neil, I'll say it will be a biological related one.
Yeah. I'll just go in with the odds and the prior prizes and say nuclear receptors. What the hey?
I'm going to stay strong with my PChem roots and go single molecule spectroscopy also.
All right.
Yeah. We'll find out soon.
Well, folks, thank you everyone who tuned into the broadcast. This has been a lot of fun for me, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I want to thank C&EN, Chemistry World, Nature Chemistry, everyone who promoted this, everyone who spread the word. I also want to special thank to Joanne Monaster of Joanne Loves Science and Scientific American blogs, who was the one who taught me how the heck to use a Google Hangout in the first place. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and I can assure you this won't be the last time we do this. Happy picking, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.